across the globe, Psalm 23 is a familiar one. People have memorized it for their bedtime prayers. I'll never forget one of the patients I served as her chaplain. When all else left her mind, the 23rd Psalm remained. Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. It lingered with her spirit and with her soul and with her body. We recite these things in Sunday school. Psalm 23 is referenced in popular culture. I remember in the 1990s hearing it on the television show ER. And ever since, I hear it referenced on a regular basis. It shows up in music. It shows up in art. Most of all, we see it in funeral rites. Yes? Psalm 23 tells a very personal story of one individual. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. The Psalm of David. The Bible tells us. I want you to think about this not so much as just one person's experience, but rather as an archetype that's representative of all of us in our life's journey. The psalmist identifies for us directly and implicitly troubles that so many of us know. People feel alone. People have need. People feel like there's no place to rest. People feel unsettled and ill at ease. People ache for restoration in their souls. People long to have a leader and a protector to watch over them, like we talked about with the children, a shepherd who will protect the sheep from the wolves. People do live in dark valleys of death and loss. People feel no comfort. There are plenty of people who have enemies. People are empty. People have no shelter and no support. People need hope. Let me ask you, anybody here, no point of resonance at all? Every single one of us can find something in that psalm that helps us to understand our own fears, right? All of us can find familiar space. We can see our own aches and our own pains in it. So in preparation for today's work of worship, liturgy and worship are the work of the people. It's not just one person. I invited folks, you and others, to join in through the wonders of social media with me in this conversation of giving up fear. So I asked, what do people fear? I'm going to read down the list for you. A health crisis that would prevent me from caring for my loved ones and my responsibilities. A loss of control. God's laughing today at the microphone and the PowerPoint and the music. And Dr. David, I'm so glad you're sick today. Poor Betty got the flu. Loss of control, people. Spiders and ticks and bees the children talked about. Outliving my children or my grandchildren. Other people. Other people. Being alone and losing mobility. Being abandoned. Being unlovable because there's something intrinsically flawed in me, or I've done something terrible to others. Maybe to one. Maybe I've done something terrible that nobody else knows about, and I couldn't possibly be loved if they knew. Living a life without purpose or without meaning. Suffering. Losing everything. Being laughed at or mocked. The big C. Cancer. Being the victim of violence. You know, one of the things that women deal with every day that maybe men are not aware of is they're constantly thinking about what are we going to do when somebody comes after us. Always in our minds. Girls on college campuses, how I'm going to avoid being a victim of violence. And in these days, with terrorism stirring and people doing things, not just from people abroad and other forces, but of our own making, People who look just like us are doing this stuff. Fear of being a victim of violence. Losing a spouse. Being rejected because I'm not good enough. The unknown. Now I'm going to hit you with a couple of funnies. I saved them for the last. One of my former parishioners wrote to me and said, losing my mental capability, ... Oh, wait. Because you see, she's a middle school teacher. And all the dynamics she's dealing with every day in the school system, she's trying to hold on with a thread. But I told the river service, the number one fear that people have in terms of illness is not cancer. It's of dementia and Alzheimer's and losing our mental faculties. So that one's pretty serious. The other, for you who are visiting with us today and are maybe not familiar with the United Methodist Church, we are in the midst of appointment making season. That's when clergy are reassigned to new appointments. Churches are getting ready to receive word of a new pastor coming. So the fear of the bishop and the cabinet at appointment making time. We who are in that know that intimately as a fear. You don't know what's going to happen, so the unknown is a big deal. But what about food insecurity? What about, am I going to have shelter? What about if dad comes home drunk tonight and starts swinging fists at mom again? What about if my child overdoses? What about? Another connected to our congregation chose to write to me at length, and we're going to come back to her story a couple of different times this morning. She wrote about the pervasive reality of her experience of fear from the time in which she was formed in her mother's womb with the connective tissue to her mother's fearful pregnancy. She experienced poverty and abuse and alcoholism and mental illness and domestic violence and severe neglect and abandonment by her mother that led to her being placed in a foster care system where she didn't know what was going to happen. She experienced, as a result, a deep fear of failure, of rejection, of being sent back to her birth home where there was awful violence. The fear of making a mistake that might set somebody off at her. The fear of being physically hurt. The fear of people seeing who she really is. The fear of revealing her secrets. Most of all, the fear that God could not accept her or find her worthy. As an adult, she experienced sexual assault and paired that with her childhood trauma and that of her youth. It made it very difficult for her to reconcile her deeply sincere held Christian beliefs with her sexual identity. And she was so afraid and continues to be afraid that she'll be discriminated against. Friends, all of this led her to say to me, fear can be a positive motivator, but it can also be debilitating. And she acknowledged that for a long time she truly was paralyzed, afraid that she might hurt others by her own actions, and she couldn't tolerate that at all. Take us back to the scripture. One of the most powerful readings that I experienced as a part of my studies in seminary with the Old Testament class, Professor John Hayes, God rest his soul, was in looking at Psalm 23. Not as a psalm of comfort that I might read at a funeral. Not just as a place of identification with a shepherd who's protecting me, but that of a manslayer. Y'all familiar with the idea of a manslayer in the Old Testament? I'll invite you, if you want, later on, look up Deuteronomy. It's in the first 5 books of the Bible, chapter 19, verses 1 through 10, and you can read about it. And in that passage of Scripture, what God does is he lays out a plan for the people to set aside 3 cities. 3 cities that are to be sanctuary, protected spaces, because God is providing land for the people to possess. This is their place to be, and he wants to set aside these 3 regions, these 3 cities for shelter. Why? Verse 3 says, God gives you this so that anyone who is a homicide can flee there to one of them. Verse 4, now this is the case of a homicide who might flee there and live, and that is someone who has killed another person unintentionally. When the two had not been at enmity, before. Meaning they hadn't been butting heads, they hadn't been fighting, they hadn't been squabbling, complete accident. And the scripture goes on to give an example of what that would look like. Let's say two guys go out into the woods and they're trying to cut down a tree. And in the cutting down of that tree, the axe head swings off the handle and flies and hits the other guy in the head and knocks him dead. And oh my goodness. Now this is in a world where lex talionis abides, the code of Hammurabi, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. The guy's thinking to himself, I just took a life. That man's family has a right to come after me, put me to death. But what the scripture is saying, this guy didn't mean to. This guy deserves protection. This guy deserves shelter. So he can take off and he can hoof it for one of these sanctuary cities where he can hide and be sheltered for the rest of his days. Verse 6 says, if the distance is too great, the avenger of blood and hot anger might pursue and overtake and put the killer to death, although a death sentence was not deserved, since the two had not been at enmity before. Therefore I command you, you shall set apart these three sanctuary cities. A manslayer by God's design can claim refuge. Think about a reason to hide. Whew. Fearing no evil in the valley of the shadow of death. An avenger of blood might be coming after him. Takes on a whole new meaning, doesn't it? I need shelter. I need God's providence. I need God's comfort. A rod and a staff, they mean something more in light of that, don't they? What about having a meal, a banquet at the table with your enemies staring you in the face? A manslayer knows what it is to face an avenger. Lo and behold, he can safely dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I get it, y'all. That may feel repulsive. Think about somebody killing somebody else and that they might deserve shelter and protection. But the scripture promises those overtones ring out for us. Let's say, anybody ever read The Hunchback of Notre Dame? Seen a movie? Remember the Disney version? Quasimodo? We're laughing at it because it's scary and it makes it feel lighter, doesn't it? Quasimodo lifts up Esmeralda and he cries, "Sanctuary! Sanctuary! Sanctuary!" Because avengers are coming after her. He needs shelter. And he cries it on her behalf. Psalm 34, verse 4. I sought the Lord, and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. I hope Lord Jay gets over the fear of wolves and bees one day. And all the rest of us, for that matter. We can look at Psalm 23 not only to see fears, but we can see hope and joy and grace in it too. Read back through it and uncover that grace. The psalmist is affirming that there's a relationship to be had with God and uses this metaphor of the shepherd. People know the beauty of poetry and imagery, and it makes sense to them when they read that psalm. This isn't just literally about a shepherd and sheep, it's metaphor. And poetry and imagery help us to cope with the world. People know that God's going to grant us what we need. The psalmist is showing that there's comfort to be had, that people can experience enough and plenty. That hunger and thirst are going to be satisfied by God. There's space. Let that tension flow out of your shoulders. To take a deep breath. People feel a sense of guidance from God. People feel confident, companioned by God. Folks, you can find security in God. You can even find ease in a time of conflict when somebody's chasing right on your heels. People know restoration. People claim blessing. People are aware of beauty, love, mercy, goodness, and peace in every step. I told you that we'd come back to what this one wrote to me. He asked me to share it with you if I liked I think the Lord led it that way. He asked me to do so without naming her, and so I will respect that. The gift to share it with permission. So going back, she said, fear can be a positive motivator, but it can also be debilitating. Eventually, counseling, she said, went on to help her. Helped her to recognize that she had PTSD, post-traumatic stress. She needed help. She continued to work on her help with God, with that counselor. She worked through a 12-step program, too. We have those meeting here at this church, AA and NA, help bring about healing in her life. And thank the good Lord above, He led her to an inclusive congregation that could love her bumps and bruises and brokenness and all. She wrote this, and I'm going to read directly to you from it. What I do know about fear is that it has broken me. Still, it has been valuable by helping me to build a relationship with God, with others, and with myself. Fear has also humbled me, and it's brought me closer to God. I believe that it has made my faith stronger, because against all odds, I am still here. I am still alive. I truly believe in my darkest hours, God carried me and provided for me when I could not do it myself. I still believe in the goodness of God in humanity. Can you imagine all the things that she's experienced? She still believes in the goodness of God and the goodness of human beings. She went on to say how God has used her fear to help her learn how to advocate for other people, speak up on behalf of their needs for justice and protection, to profess her testimony of faith, and to share her experience of grace. He said, He makes me still, and He wraps His arms around me, and He holds me so close I can experience peace and calmness in the storms. God allows me to have gentleness and kindness. What do y'all think about the fact that she didn't know that I'd been asked to preach on Psalm 23 today? I do believe the good Lord was working in her sharing her experience with me and with you. But how do we give up fear? Let's look to the Psalm. Let's look to God. Let's look to our community of faith. That list of fears that everybody shared with me, and Joe invited you to tell what you're afraid of to somebody near you. The majority, if not all of those fears, relate to loss, don't they? Loss and grief. Why is it that when we get to live so boldly and courageously and joyfully, the undercurrent is our fear that something's going to go away? Maybe it's an actual unresolved grief. The woman who wrote had all kinds of griefs to work with. Maybe it's the anticipated loss of grief. In the work of hospice every day, I experience people anticipating grief on the horizon. It's always present. But you know what? Unresolved grief, if we don't deal with it, breaks the spirit, if not the body and the soul. So number one, you're going to deal with fear. Confront your experience of loss. Look it in the eyeball. Don't run away from it. Number two, this is going back to a sermon that Michelle preached a few weeks ago. Acknowledge that we've never been in control in the first place. Never in control. We can pretend, we can put it together, we can lay out all the steps, we can communicate abundantly, but sometimes, Sunday, go sideways. It's also one of the lessons that people in 12-step programs learn. Control and fear are often intertwined. But you know what? Strangely, release feels like freedom. Y'all ever gripped your fists? Gripped them hard, 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 hard. Holding on, holding on, holding on. Then let go. Hard to straighten them out. And it takes a little bit. The longer you hold, the tighter that grip, pain starts going up your arm. But strangely, when you let go, release feels like freedom. And you wonder, why was I holding on so fiercely? That's 2. 3, persevere in a relationship with God and others. We've learned an awful lot today from each other, haven't we? We've learned an awful lot from God. Stick with each other. Y'all, we're in a day and age where people like to bail out on relationships. You say something that I don't like and it scares me, I'm running. Don't talk to me anymore. How's that working out for you? That doesn't. We've got to find a way to love each other through our faults and foibles. Number 4, become an advocate for others. Work on reconciliation. I thought seriously about telling y'all today about the most terrifying experience in my life, and it was bitter and it was awful and it was difficult, and it has forever changed who I am. Today's not the day to do that. But I'll tell you that fear helped me to speak up on other people who've experienced the same thing. And because I learned it, I have been helpful, and I have been an extension of God's grace in others' lives. You can do the same to somebody else. The woman who wrote has learned how to do that on behalf of others. She's learned how to help other people make peace, and to find sanctuary, and to claim a place of refuge for those. Number 5 is to use your curiosity. That's what I was telling the kids about. Curiosity. Kids, they teach us so much. Asking why, getting engaged, looking at the wonders of the world, being playful. Let's go to that person that we disagree with, right? Or who looks scary. I grew up in a household where my mom and dad taught me to stay away from people who had tattoos. I'm serious. You probably taught your kids that too. I grew up in a household that said if somebody wore tattered jeans and tears and big leather jackets and chains on it, and maybe there's an earring that connected to their nose, stay away from them, be scared. But you know what? I learned that maybe that wasn't the best lesson my mom and dad ever taught me. I learned that by talking to people who were different than I am, God worked. And I found out sometimes there are good reasons that people look the way they look, and have lived where they live, and have experienced what they've experienced. And I can learn a thing or two from them, and together we can do things for God's stranger no longer so strange. The 6th thing I tell you in this list of ways to deal with fear is to encounter creation. Look for what God is doing in the creation. Before anybody learned how to write, before anything got put down in a Bible, the first testament was God's creation. Stars in the sky and the hills and the still waters and the running streams, the creatures of the earth, look for what God is doing in the creation, what you can experience there and to conquer. The 7th is to find creative responses to your fear. I played with the kids to laugh at it. I coaxed you all into laughing with me. Sometimes laughter is a creative response to help us get past that thing which is so scary. Sometimes it's poetry, sometimes it's art, sometimes it's writing music. Our woundedness can bring about the greatest gifts. The other side of being scared is sacred. The other side of being scared is the sacred. And if you look at those 2 words, all you got to do is move the sea. Sarah von Brethnick said this: one word can be transformed in the other by simply moving, making one change. Transformation, grace. Confront what it is to experience loss. Acknowledge that we've never been in control in the first place. Persevere in a relationship with God and others. Seek to advocate and reconcile with others and on their behalf. Use your God-given curiosity. Look to the creation. Claim your creative response. For the Lord is my shepherd, and I shall not want.